Alright, what's up guys, Shlost here. Welcome back to another Yu-Gi-Oh video. In this video we're going to be going through some BGS returns from a recent submission that I sent off. Now you can probably tell from the title of the video that this was not the most successful return for me, but I wanted to make this video anyway, just to make everyone aware of the problems at Beckett at the moment. Because these are problems which I have never experienced in previous submissions I've sent to them, so I wanted to make sure people are aware this is now happening at Beckett. So the first problem we're just going to get right into in this video is that Beckett actually damaged a number of the more expensive cards which I sent to them in the submission. So here's a beautiful European print Cyber End Dragon. Now I sent this card off definitely expecting a 9.5 overall grade, gem mint. And when the grades popped online, I saw it had an 8.5 on edges, which I thought was pretty strange because I had looked it over a lot beforehand and there was nothing wrong with the edges. And I do actually have pictures of the card before I sent it off. I looked over those. There was no visible edge wear whatsoever. But when I got the card back and turned it over, you'll be able to see right away that there is a huge nick on the top back edge. And that's why it got the 8.5 on edges. Like I said, that was not there when I sent the card off, so I am in contact with Beckett trying to get some kind of compensation for it. At the moment, they have not acknowledged any of the problems in this submission, so I'm not that hopeful that I'm even going to get anything in return for this, but I thought I should at least make this video to make people aware that just like sending to PSA at the moment, you definitely have the risk of getting your cards damaged by Beckett too, and you should probably take pictures of the cards before you send them off in case this happens and you need to try and claim some kind of compensation. So this was the absolute worst card in the submission for me. Because even though it's still a mint 9, which is not a bad overall grade, I spent years looking for this card in this condition. I don't expect to ever find one this clean again, and so it's just a real shame that that had to happen to this card. Alright, now unfortunately that was not the only example of damage in this submission. The other one which was particularly bad was my Fortress Whale. I pulled this card from a factory sealed TP7 box myself, and it was in absolutely fantastic shape. So when the grades popped, I wasn't that surprised it didn't get a gem because almost nothing in the entire submission did. But when I got it back, I was very disappointed to see the same damage again. It's not as bad as the Cyber End Dragon, but you can see that edge wear right at the top. And the way that happens, I assume it's when they're taking the card out of the card saver. Whoever was grading these was just in a massive hurry and essentially flicked his finger over the top back edge and just nicked it pretty cleanly right there. So it's completely unacceptable handling. And as I said, Beckett have not acknowledged that there was any problem with the submission yet. I am still going to press them harder because I really cannot believe the level of damage that they inflicted on some of these high-end cards. So yeah, this is another big disappointment for me because I pulled the card myself and it definitely deserved a gem mint grade. The centering's a bit off, so I expected that 9 on centering. But when I sent it off, again, I have pictures of the card before I sent it. There was no edge wear, and I was expecting a gem mint grade. And the final example of damage on a high-end card is on this Rainbow Dragon Ghost Rare. This is, again, it's a European print, so obviously the edges are more fragile. Now, what's funny about this one is it got a 9 on surface when the card has no hollow scratches, no surface issues on either side whatsoever. It's hard for me to show that through the case, but I guarantee this card does not have any surface issues, and I've looked over it in detail since getting the card back as well to verify that. So this card got a 9.5 on edges, which I was expecting. But if you look at the card, you should be able to see pretty quickly that there's a nice big nick on the bottom edge. Hopefully you can see that pretty clearly. Which I assume this must have happened after the grader had already assigned the grade because he gave it a 9.5 on edges, which it would never deserve with that kind of damage. And so I think possibly it happened when he was putting it into the sleeve after grading it. So again, it's just incredibly careless handling from Beckett on the whole in this submission. And the damage is the most disappointing thing to me because whereas if the card was just wrongly graded, I could send it back and then get the correct grade. With the 3 cards I just showed you, there's no way they're going to grade gem mint with the damage that they've received. So yeah, moving on from that, I'm not going to go through every single card that was in the submission because there were over 100 cards, and I don't think there's much point in going through each and every single one. But the general theme of the submission was that very few cards got gem mint grades, and with the majority of the cards, there's no correlation between the condition of the card and the grade it got. So I'll give you a couple of examples of one end of that spectrum now. These are the couple of the weakest cards in the submission. On the left is a Glossy Unlimited, SDY Dark Magician. This is your Wavy First Edition Monster Reborn on the right. And both of these cards I would not have expected to grade as 9s. The SDY Dark Magician, I don't know how easily you can see it, but it has a pretty big dent. You can kind of see it in the hollow there. It's hard to show through the thick Beckett case, but there's a whole little cluster of pin dents over here. So you would expect a surface grade maybe of a 7.5, something like that. Got the 8.5 on surface and the overall 9 mint grade, which I think is definitely too high. And here's this Wavy Monster Reborn. The card's not in bad condition. It does have a nick on the top edge. It has a nick on the top corner. On the back, the corners have some whitening, and the top back edge is also kind of all just a little bit white. So I thought this card had a shot at a mint 9, probably a basic 9 with an 8.5 on edges. And in the end, it's come back as a solid quad plus 9. So these two cards did better than I expected. But if we move to most of the cards in this submission, especially the better condition cards that I sent, the result was the exact opposite. So I sent a complete set of TP1 supers, and all of these I bought from a seller who pulled them from a case of TP1 himself, so they were in absolutely incredible shape. Most of the subgrades are fine, but they all got this 8.5 on surface, which in my opinion is just not justified. I think possibly there's a tiny bit of waxing on the back, but that's just a factory issue, and I do not see how that could knock it to an 8.5, especially when cards were getting 8.5s with significant dents on them at the same time. So yeah, like I said, this happened to pretty much the whole super set that I sent. They got decent grades for the most part, but the surfaces got 8.5s, despite the cards being extremely clean. Now, these cards didn't get damaged or anything, so I will just be cracking them and resubmitting them in a future submission. But I wanted to make this video and capture it all on camera anyway, just to show everyone that Beckett is having a lot of problems with the consistency of the grading at the moment. These cards were all sent on a bulk 60-day submission, so I do not know if that makes a difference. A lot of my friends have been sending off recently shorter turnaround submissions, and those have all actually done fine. But either way, I'm not impressed by the level of service from Beckett in this sub. So as I said earlier, in terms of what was personally most disappointing for me in the submission, it would definitely be the fact that my cards were damaged, because that's just not something you expect from a professional grading company. But in terms of the actual worst part of the submission for grades received, that would definitely be the LOB that I sent off. So I sent off 40 different LOB hollows, and of those 40, I got just one 9.5 overall grade, and many of the overall grades I got, I just cannot make sense of at all. So I got a lot of 9s and 8.5s, which have actually even pretty weak subgrades, and I cannot for the life of me match the subgrades to the cards in terms of the actual conditions. So here's an Exodia head, which I bought from someone who pulled it straight from a box. Now the card has poor centering, especially on the back. The card is way off center. So I expected probably an 8.5 on centering, and the card actually got a 9. But at the same time, the card got a 9 on edges and corners. When the edges and corners, I mean on the front they're perfect, on the back, the corners, again, really don't have anything wrong with them. I think there's one tiny dot of edge white up there. But apart from that, they're extremely nice. And the surface got an 8.5, which, like I showed you earlier, I had cards with dents getting an 8.5. A friend of mine who actually had a Stardust Dragon Ghost Rare in the same submission got a 9 on surface despite having a crease on the back of the card. And meanwhile, this card got an 8.5 on surface so the front is perfect. The back is also extremely nice, but it has a couple of horizontal factory lines, which you can hopefully see there. And the grader put that straight down to an 8.5, which I just completely disagree with, especially in the context of comparing it to the other cards I got back in this submission. So that was not the only LOB card that did badly, obviously. Pretty much all of them got that 8.5 on surface, and if I show you these cards again, I mean these cards were mostly I bought from people who pulled them themselves, and again, some of them have these light factory lines, but I do not see that as a cause, especially on the back, to give the card an overall 8.5 surface. Lots of my wavy hollows I sent also got that 8.5 surface when they are, again, extremely clean all over. I couldn't actually find anything wrong with this Maneater bug at all, apart from the fact it has one little print dot just above the defense text there. So yeah, I'll just show you one more of those 9s I got. This was a Cursive Dragon, which I was definitely expecting a strong gem mint grade on. The card has great centering, and the edges and corners are pretty much perfect on it. But again, it got that 9 on edges and a 9 on surface when I really just could not find anything wrong with this card. So it's disappointing because in a way, a 9 is not a terrible grade. But when a card is this clean, there's no excuse in my opinion for giving it the subgrades that it got. And things get even worse than the 9s. So here are a couple of Flame Swordsmen. I sent off 2 Wavy Flame Swordsmen. Now the one on the left I had previously sent in a past submission, and it had graded 0.5 away from a 9.5, and I really thought that it had, it was in good enough shape to bump another 0.5 up. But in practice, it actually went down a whole 0.5 on every single one of the subs. So now it's a pretty weak 8.5. Again, if I show you the condition, you should hopefully be able to see that the card is extremely clean. It's much cleaner than that Wavy Monster Reborn 9 that I showed you, for example. And the surface, which got an 8, has almost nothing wrong with it. I think this card had a few light scratches on the back, which you won't be able to see through the case. But definitely nothing that would knock it down to an 8. And the other one I sent it was slightly weaker, but I definitely expected it to at least get that mint 9. Again, it's in great shape overall, great edges, great corners. I think it has a couple of tiny little print dots up here, and that's why I thought maybe the surface would get an 8.5, but definitely not the 8 that it received. And the third Flame Swordsman I got was actually the most disappointing of all. But it brings me on to another point about the inconsistency of the grading in this submission. So this is a Glossy Flame Swordsman, and it has, you can see it has the foil line error. And I really love this card because the foil line matches up pretty much perfectly with the line on his sword. So it really complements the artwork nicely. Now this card again is pack fresh. I was definitely expecting a strong 9.5 on it. Maybe worst case scenario, a 9 on surface because of this line. But the grader, I assume, since there's nothing else wrong with the card, that he deducted the grade just for the foil line. But I actually had 2 different foil line errors in the same submission, and they did not get the same treatment. So here is a Dark Magician from Stardate Yugioh. Now this card has an extremely thick foil line, and you can actually see it all the way down the card thanks to the foil bleed on the card. So if anything was going to get docked heavily in the submission for having the foil line, I expected it to be this Dark Magician, because it's a lot more significant of an error than the Flame Swordsman was. But you can see this card got a 9 on surface, which I was actually very happy with. This one got an 8 when they both had the same issue. And this Maneater bug actually got a 8.5 on surface, when again it has the same issue. This one's a much lighter line, so it's hard to see. I think you sort of got a bit of it there. There's a line going down over here on the card, just a very light foil line. Again, this is a pack fresh card, so I don't think there was anything else that knocked the surface grade. They just hit it down 1.5 for that very light foil line just there. Okay, and the last issue I'm going to talk about, now that the inconsistency of the grading and also the damage on the cards is out of the way, is actually to do with the cases and the labels on the cards. So if I just bring back this Maneater bug, I received it back with a loose part on the case which fell off as soon as I started looking over the card. You can see this piece of plastic fits in there. So I don't know how that happened, but the quality of the cases seems to be lower than normal. That was not the only issue I had with casing. So a lot of the cards which I sent off had all sorts of stains on the case. So here's the one 9.5 I was able to grade from LOB. I think this card was actually still very harshly graded because it was pack pulled, and while the centering definitely was fair enough to give it a 9. The other subgrades were extremely strong, so I was disappointed to see all 3 of them just get 9.5s. I didn't actually get a single 10 on edges, surface, or corners in the whole 100 plus card submission, so I don't know what the grader was thinking, but clearly he did not award any kind of pristines. But yeah, if you look at the case on this card, you'll see it has all sorts of stains and marks on it, which are right from, like, this is how I received it from Beckett. And the back of the case is also cracked on the inside, so there's no crack which I can feel on the outside, but you can see there's a pretty huge crack there. I had one more case that was cracked in the submission, and lots of cases which had this kind of just really nasty gunk all over the front, which makes it completely impossible to appreciate the aesthetics of the card. And the final thing, which I don't know what the issue is currently, I'll probably have to crack this card to find out, is that this Mystical Elf here came back with a weird, I don't know if it's a stain on the card, I don't know if it's dirt in the case, but you can see there's something on that edge, which was not there when I sent the card off. So I'm hoping that's not damage and I can just remove it and resubmit the card because it's in absolutely great shape. But it's just another thing in this submission that I was not at all impressed by from Beckett. Okay, and the last issue, which I have to say Beckett didn't actually do as badly on my submission on as they have done on a lot of other people's, is to do with the labeling of Wavy and Glossy cards. So of the 40 LOB cards I sent in first edition in this submission, 39 of them actually got the correct label of Wavy or Glossy, but my Swords of Revealing Light, which I sent, actually got labeled as both. You can see it says Wavy/Glossy on the label. Now, it should be pretty easy to see that this card is in fact a glossy print, but I thought it was kind of funny because some people have been talking about there being a third print of LOB recently, and clearly Beckett is on team third print because that's what my Swords of Revealing Light came back as. So yeah, that's all of the bad stuff out of the way from this submission. Again, I apologize for the more kind of negative video than I normally make, which I didn't have to make it, but I thought it was good to put this out there just to show people everything that's going wrong at the moment with Beckett. But this was a big submission, over 100 cards, like I said, and so when you send off that many cards, you're always going to get a few good results. So I thought I'd finish this video by going over the handful of actual highlights that I got as well. So the first thing to show is my Wavy first edition LOB Blue Eyes that I sent in. Now this card is way off center both ways, so realistically I thought the centering might get an 8 or 7.5, but it actually got an 8.5 centering, and that enabled the card to get the overall grade of 8.5. So I'm very happy with that. It's a very nice card. I would like to upgrade it to a 9 and eventually a 9.5 for my own collection one day. But this will do pretty nicely as a filler for now, and especially the front is in fantastic shape. The next thing, before I get on to the 9.5s that I got, there are a few pretty good 9s that I got as well. So here's a set of European first edition starter deck ultras. These are actually the first printed version, which is made in the USA and then shipped to Europe. I bought these super cheap on eBay a couple of years back, and they were not in good enough shape to get gem mint grades. So overall, I was pretty happy that they both got mint 9s because they make a nice set together. Another 9 that I was happy about is this European print Shining Phoenix Enforcer, which got a Quad Plus 9. European cards from this era are more or less impossible to grade. I've never seen a gem mint European Shining Phoenix Enforcer. I'm not sure if I've ever seen a gem mint graded European EOJ card at all. So yeah, in mint 9, especially with strong subgrades, I was pretty happy with this card, and that'll definitely be staying in the case. Another card which definitely did well is this Harpy's Feather Duster. I sent it in realistically thinking there was no way it would get a 9.5. It has a pretty thick factory line across the front, which a lot of TP8 does, but it also has this kind of dent all the way along the bottom, so I definitely thought the surface would get some kind of 8.5 scenario. The surface actually got a 9, which in a way I don't know how to feel about it, but at the same time, having this graded as a 9 with these subs is definitely a nice bonus for me, considering how badly a lot of the submission went. Okay, and the last couple of 9s. First, here's a Mechanical Chaser. I showed you the super rares I sent from Tournament Pack 1, which all got destroyed in the submission. But ironically, the ultra rare Chaser, which was definitely the worst condition card that I sent from Tournament Pack, did actually pretty well. It didn't get a 9.5, but it was only 0.5 away. It got a quad plus 9. And I mean, it's a nice card. It definitely had some scratching on the back, which I think you can see there. So I kind of expected to get an 8.5 on surface, maybe even an 8.5 on centering from a harsh grader because it's pretty OC. But it did not. It got great subgrades in the end, so that was another success. And the last 9 I'll show you is this Wavy print Star Deck Kaiba Blue Eyes White Dragon. These are not easy to grade, and this card had a chance to get a gem mint grade, but overall I did not quite expect it to manage that. There were a few little surface issues on the back, and a couple of little dots of white and things like that. So as a quad plus 9, again, I'm pretty happy with that card. Okay, now we'll move on to the actual 9.5s I received, which there were, I believe, 8 of in the whole submission. The first one is a little bittersweet because I sent off this Yada thinking it would get pretty close to a pristine. It's one of the cleanest cards I sent in the whole submission, but Beckett did actually damage the corner slightly. That corner now has some whitening on it. This one has a tiny bit as well. When I sent the cards, there was no whitening at all. So it is unfortunate that the corners now are a 9, and they would easily have been a 9.5, if not a 10 when I sent it off. But at least the card still got a gem mint grade, and I'm pretty happy with that. The next 9.5, which I, again, don't really know how to feel about, is this Mirror Force that I graded. Now, I sent this card off thinking it would get probably an 8.5 on centering. You can see the card is very significantly shifted to the left. I thought maybe it could get a 9 on centering if it was lucky. The rest of the card is packed fresh. Now, the surface got a 9, which I have no idea why the surface got a 9. I thought, if anything, the surface could have been a 10 on this. But the centering actually got a 9.5, which, I mean, in my opinion, is not the correct grade. But at the same time, it meant that the card could get that overall 9.5, which is definitely not something I'm going to complain about. And the final one, which was, again, kind of a weird grade, was this Summon Skull. Now, I expected a 9.5 on this because the centering, the corners, and the surface were all perfect. It got a 9 on surface, which, again, I don't know what the explanation for that was. This card was packed fresh. But then it got a 9.5 on edges, which I expected a 9 on because, as you can probably see, it has a little nick on the right edge. It's nothing bad, but again, it's just the case with pretty much all the cards in this sub that even when the overall grade was correct, the subgrades were not correctly assigned, and that was the case with the Summon Skull too. So the next card is one of the few which actually got exactly what I sent it in thinking it would get, which is a Jinzo 9.5. Very happy to add this to the collection. The card was in great shape, just a little bit OC, so it got exactly what I expected, which is nice to be able to say that with at least a few cards in a submission that was as baffling as this one was. So yeah, that's definitely a nice one to add to the collection. And I also got a 9.5 on a 1000 Dragon from Mellow Raiders. This one got a 9 on edges, which I'm not really sure why it got a 9 on edges. But I don't plan to sell it, so realistically I don't mind too much if it's a basic rather than a quad, which I thought it had a great shot to get. But yeah, really nice card. Iconic Metal Raiders card. Metal Raiders has actually gone up a lot in value recently. So that's a nice one to grade. And then to finish the submission, I did manage to get 3 quad 9.5s in the sub. Now the first one is actually kind of a bit of a dubious quad because you can see the centering on this Buster Blader is not great. Realistically, I expected a 9 on centering and the rest of the card to be gem mint. But it did in fact get a quad label. You can see it actually has some waxing on the back, which they obviously did not mind for this card. But yeah, at the end of the day, I'm pretty happy to be able to grade that. Probably my favorite or my second favorite Ultra from Pharaoh's Servant, so definitely a nice one to grade. Okay, the next one is actually more of a deserving quad. Here's a Black Skull Dragon from Metal Raiders. I sent this card off in great shape. This is probably the hardest card to grade for Metal Raiders, in my opinion. It's very difficult to find copies that don't have any kind of wear on them. So to come back as a quad 9.5 is a really nice result. I was definitely happy with this card. Okay, and to finish, the final card which I got back in this submission was actually a Pokemon card. So I didn't send off many Pokemon cards in this sub because in general I don't really collect Pokemon. But I had this card stashed away from many years ago. I didn't pull it myself, but I traded for it on the spot when it was pulled by a friend of mine way back when, probably 2008, 2009 kind of period. So the card is a first edition Blaine's Charizard from Gym Challenge, and again it graded that quad 9.5. You can see this one even has a bit of that little swirl going on up in the top right corner. So really nice card. Very happy with the return. I think it fully deserved the quad. It has fantastic condition both on the back and the front. Realistically, this card could pretty easily grade a PSA 10 as well, but I really didn't want to send a PSA with all of the issues they've had with grading over the past year or so. Now, obviously, in the end, I got pretty much the same issues sending to Beckett, which was very disappointing, but at least some of the cards did do well, and this was definitely, I think, the biggest card in the submission for me. Alright, and that brings us to the end of this video. So thank you everyone for watching. I hope you were able to enjoy the video, even though it was a bit of a longer video and a bit of a less positive video than I would normally make. I will post an update video to this if I hear anything back from Beckett, if they agree to do anything about all of the issues in this submission. So yeah, I'll definitely let you guys know if anything does happen like that. But either way, I'll be back making videos more like the ones I've already made very soon. So I will see you guys in the next video.